Hey everyone, today we are looking at Romans chapter 11 and 12. And if you've been following along, Romans is a difficult and complicated book. And as Daniel said yesterday, chapters 9 to 11 are particularly difficult to sort of wrestle with and understand. And the reason is because there's an identity crisis that's going on within this church. This church would have been started by Jewish believers. So people who were culturally Jewish, they put their faith in Jesus, but continued to maintain their Jewish identity and follow the Jewish laws and customs, but they had faith in Jesus. In the city of Rome, where this church was established, however, there was an edict that was declared in 54 AD, where the emperor essentially kicked all the Jewish people out of the city of Rome. Now, we know that not all of these Jewish people actually left, but a large percentage of them did. And what happened in this particular church is that some of these Jewish Christians stayed, and what they noticed is that Gentiles or non-Jewish people started to put their faith in Jesus and attend this church as well, which is an amazing picture, but it created a problem within this church. And that was this. With a church that's a mixed sort of cultural backgrounds or mixed ethnicities, how do you get along? How do you worship the right way? How do you know what obedience really looks like? So you have a group of people who are sort of ethnically Jewish, still following the Jewish customs and thinking that these new converts to Christianity needed to do the same. But then you have these Gentile Christians who have come in. They don't really know very much about the Jewish law or customs, and they're like, does this stuff even really matter? Don't we all just love Jesus and worship him? Isn't it just by his death and resurrection that we're saved and not through any of this other stuff? So through the book of Romans, Paul is addressing this issue of how do we in fact get along when we've come from different backgrounds with different histories and different customs. And he's been building the case that to say that having a Jewish identity is advantageous. He says this all the way back in chapters 2 and 3, because Jewish people have this long history and knowledge of God in his holy scriptures and the law and what it means to live for him. So that is advantageous to have access to those things. But in the end, his point is that everybody is a sinner. Everybody needs Jesus. It doesn't matter whether you've had access to God and his laws and his rules or not. All of us find ourselves on the same footing. We are all broken. We're all sinful, and we all are in need of Jesus to save us. Doesn't matter if you've had a past knowledge of God or not. The response is, have you put your faith in Jesus? And Paul in chapter 11 of Romans is seeking to answer this issue once and for all. He asks the question, so what do we do with these people who have been called God's people for centuries? Are they in or are they out? And Paul wants to argue again that everybody is on the same footing. In verses 28 to 32, he has this weird argument that may not make a lot of sense to us. But here's what he says. He says, as far as the gospel is concerned, they, the Jewish people, are enemies for your sake. But as far as election is concerned, they are loved on the account of the patriarchs. For God's gift and his call are irrevocable. Just as you were at one time disobedient to God, have now received mercy as a result of their disobedience, so they too have become disobedient in order that they too may now receive mercy as a result of God's mercy to you. For God has bound everyone over to disobedience so that he may have mercy on them all. What is this saying? Well, it's really complicated, but what it's saying is that Jewish people had access to God through the law, through the prophets, through the Jewish customs and this history, and yet many of them still weren't faithful. Calling yourself a Jew just in name and saying that you are therefore saved and part of God's family, it doesn't add up. Earlier in this chapter, he talks about it's not by your blood lineage or your family heritage that you're part of God's family. It's whether you have responded to him in the right way or not. And Paul argues that there are lots of people who have known about God but haven't responded to him. They haven't given their lives over to him, and therefore they're not really part of this. And yet, Paul does not give up hope. He says, actually, now you Gentiles have been invited in so that you might make those other people, these Jewish people, jealous. You all have, at one time, were disobedient to God, and you all have the equal access to mercy. And so, essentially, everybody is on the same footing, that all of us need Jesus. No matter who we are, no matter what our family background is, or our cultural history, or our ethnic identity, or whatever it is, we're all on the same footing. We're all broken, and we all need Jesus. And hopefully, these new Gentile Christians will be a mirror to those people that have not responded to God. Even Jewish people have not responded to God, so that they may come into the kingdom too. Paul then, in chapter 12, gives us the therefore of what this whole discussion up to this point has been all about. At the end of 11, again, he says, we're all on the same footing, so what? So what? And he begins chapter 12 by saying, well, here's the so what. He says, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, the same mercy that's available to everyone, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Paul is saying, since we are all on the same footing, we all stand under God's judgment because we're all sinners, we've all disobeyed, we all need Jesus. He says, here's what you need to do. To offer your body as a living sacrifice, right? To submit yourself to God and say, God, I need you. I'm a sinner in need of your saving grace. I don't want to look like this world any longer, but I want Jesus to come in and transform me. That is how we need to respond. And then he goes on, and the rest of chapter 12 is, well, what does this then look like? How do we answer this problem of people who come from different backgrounds and customs and identities? How do we then live together? Well, he says, one, you're saved by Jesus, not by anything else. That's all you need to know. Submit yourself to him and let him transform you into a family. And then he goes on and he lists all these different ways to live together. To not think of yourself more highly than you ought, to use the gifts that God has given you, to be sincere in your love and be devoted to one another, to be joyful with each other, to be patient in affliction, to be faithful in prayer, to share with those who are in need, to practice hospitality. And he goes on and on and on and says, look, God has given us a way forward. We're all sinners. We've all been offered mercy. Let us respond to that mercy, not by holding on to the past, holding on to our old way of life, our old identity, but let us go forward with this new identity where we love one another, care for one another, celebrate together, pray together, and are devoted to one another. This is our new identity in Christ, and this is the solution to the problem of how do all these different people from different backgrounds with different ethnicities or identities or ages, how do we all get along? It's this. We are transformed by Jesus. We don't hold on to our old identity any longer. And we start to do the things that look a lot like family. So that's the challenge for you and me in our church today. Instead of holding on to our background or baggage or history or whatever it is, or expecting others to act like us, that instead we say, look, I'm just a sinner, you're just a sinner. We've all been rescued by God's mercy, and let's start acting like family. So, how can you do that this week? See you later.